All right. Welcome to our PhD in Technical HCI Office Hour. This is the 2022 edition. This is, I guess, the 4th edition. Yeah. So I'm still Michael, still here at Michigan. I actually just flew back into Michigan to be back in Michigan. So I can say that I'm still here in Michigan. I have a bunch of friends. I consider them friends, and I hope you will also have some of these friends one day. I'm very proud of these friends, who are also professors or working in, they all have a PhD and they're working in research. And we're going to do a introduction, and I have a question for our friends, and then we're going to go through 3 blocks of questions. So after the introduction, please don't select everything and delete it. That would be good. Thank you. We'll do a welcome. We'll do a block 1 on application materials. There were quite a few questions. And then we do maybe a block on interviews. I think the application materials are the most important. Then we will have a Q&A with you who joined here today. And then maybe we'll have some concluding thoughts from the faculty and research friends. So we're going to get started with introductions. So I would like to welcome Parastoo. Maybe you can kick us off. What is your background, your research interests in a very short, maybe more like research area? And then I think I had one other thing. Let's just do that, and then we can do another round if we still have time.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks so much for organizing this, Michael. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you all. My name is Parastoo. I just graduated from my PhD at Stanford 2 months ago, and now I'm a visiting researcher at Meta Reality Labs. I'm in the Toronto office. Happy to answer any questions, and my research area broadly is in AR and VR interactions.
Cool. Let's go with Amy next.
Hello, everyone. I'm Amy. I started at UT Austin in the CS department this January, so I'm still in my first year as an assistant professor. My research interests are a little broad, but I'd say mostly human AI interaction. So that's creating new interactive techniques using advances in AI and ML, whether that's generation models or large language models of sorts. And then also a lot of my work recently has been in accessibility. So specifically making visual content like videos more accessible to people who use screen readers.
That's great. I really like your office. So good.
Thanks. Got a window, you know, that's exciting.
That is actually really important. One thing to look for in your PhD program. Will you have a window?
Yeah.
So Justine, welcome, Justine.
Hi, I'm Justine. I'm an assistant professor at the School of Information at the University of Michigan, where I've been for 2 months. Before that, I was a postdoc at Stanford in the computer science department. And before that, I was a PhD student in information science at Cornell University. And my research focuses on developing computational methods to study conversations. What that's looked like is I've worked with and helped out thinking with economists and political scientists and social psychologists. And I also occasionally publish to HCI-ish venues, which is why I suppose I'm here.
Well, you're very good. You're looking for PhD students. You're checking all the boxes. You are also adding, I think, a nice area of expertise. Sometimes people don't know whether that is HCI or could be an HCI, and I think these are all. It's good to have you here, Justine. DJ, want to say hi?
Hi, everyone. So thanks for organizing this, Michael, especially after the red light flight last night. Thank you. So this is DJ, everyone. I'm also at the University of Michigan, but different department than Justine. I'm at computer science and engineering, a brand new professor like everyone else here. And I did my PhD from University of Washington, master's from MIT, and my research area is in accessibility. And then so that's one word out there. I usually deal with systems research. A lot of my work deals with understanding users and developing systems and then deploying them. in the world, interacting them with the user. So like a full pipeline of stuff. And like everyone else here, looking for PhD student, mostly interested in HCI and accessible to users. Yep. So happy to answer any questions.
Great. It's good to have you here, DJ. Actually, the last on the list is me. So I'm Michael, and I'm an associate professor now. So I'm basically my 6th year, if you will, at the University of Michigan. I am in the School of Information and also affiliated with computer science and engineering. My PhD is in computer science from ETH Zurich. And I did a postdoc at Carnegie Mellon and the HCI Institute. I do think we have really cool expertise here on the panel in terms of like research experience and stuff, but also our backgrounds are really interesting. We're coming from, I mean, mostly North America, you guys, and then I'm like the odd one out, I guess. But so that's cool. And yeah, feel free to add a little bit more information. This document will be shared and archived in some sense. So we are still in the introductory portion. And here's one that maybe not everyone has to answer, but I'm curious how you would answer it at the moment. So what do you think are like types of students that you think you can work well with? So if I had to answer this, I would be thinking about how important is technical expertise for me? Do I require specific things? So anyway, a lot of our students were like wondering, am I good enough? And so here's this question. What are types of students you think you can work well with? Does anybody want to take that one?
I can start maybe. I feel like I work well with a variety of students, but I think that like some of the strongest applicants will have some, close research interest fit to me, and then also likely a strength in another area. So maybe like you come from a background where you've done a lot of web programming, and that would be a strong fit because a lot of the stuff we build are web interfaces, or you have, AR and VR experience, and this is like another prototyping tool we use. Or on the other hand, I've also had students who had a background in natural language processing or computer vision. And so even if they didn't have the like interface background, they would be bringing kind of a new technical skill. And then the final set of students I would consider working with as well is students with maybe not as much of a technical background, but kind of a strong interest in co-design or community-centered design. So maybe strong qualitative methods as well. But yeah, so that's sort of a variety of different types of students.
Amy takes everybody goes to Amy. No, this was actually really good. I think I would have answered it similarly. Lily, I'm wondering, does anybody have a different or a slightly different take on that? Justine, are you thinking about?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think like matching on like background experience is really important. I think for myself, I would phrase it as I'm looking for students who are able to sink their teeth into an interesting and complicated data set. And that means two things. One, it means that you have the technical expertise, like you are socialized into the practice of data science or computer science, but also like you are curious about what's going on. Like both in terms of like, you're able to like come to me and say like, I found this in the data that's like kind of weird, interesting, let's talk about it. Or like, I read this like social science paper from the 50s, which is on my shelf. And like, I think some of this relates. So I'm sort of looking for a mix of the two, and that tends to add up to somebody who I'd enjoy working with on looking at data and looking at people interacting with this data.
Are there particular skills, let's say they are not necessarily research skills, that you're looking for, DJ or Parastoo? Wondering what you would say.
I guess. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Should not call two people. Okay, I will call DJ first. Not ladies first, sorry. Let's do DJ.
Sure, yeah, like that's pretty common in gym room. completely understand. If you were in person, you would have pointed out. You're like, okay, I do want to go next, and then it's easy to do that.
Yeah.
Anyway, right, so I think I would go back to the question initially. I think the question that was asked was obviously the expertise one, but also I think there was a question there about like how would I know whether I'm good enough for applying if I got that correctly. But I think that's really hard. I mean, I remember like when I was applying for a PhD, I didn't know whether I'm good enough to apply. And I think one thing that I really benefited from is like talking to people around me. So I actually emailed a lot of professors when I was applying for PhD and asking them about their advice and what do you think I should do. And the same way I mentioned a bunch of my relevant work and where that the work is going and what kind of research I want to do. And I think some of them were really kind enough to reply back and say that, you know, do the I mean, I understand, like not everyone had that kind of time, but some of them, they were really kind enough to reply back and say that, you should apply. I mean, I would like read your statement of purpose, I would review your letter of recommendation, but I think you should go and apply for something. The couple of things that they look for is like the same as what Amy and Justine put forward, like relevant expertise, whether you can work in the area that I'm looking for, and whether you have done some work in the area that I'm looking for. You may not, may not have to have a research paper publication yet. Also certainly helps. But if you're able to talk through some of the motivations for your work and where did it go, and if you're able to contextualize that in past research, that then really help put it forward. Yeah.
Okay, you answered quite a bit. Parastoo, anything you want to add?
No, I would have just said everything everyone said. I agree with Amy in terms of diversity of background, super important. As Justin said, the kind of technical expertise that aligns, super important. And I was going to echo what DJ said, which is we all thought we weren't good enough. And I would just encourage you to kind of flip that in your research statement and actually try to convince us why you think you could bring something that is really valuable, and that doesn't have to be kind of what you assume we're looking for. And then one thing I would add is doing a PhD is really fun, but also really hard. You're kind of navigating this like really ambiguous space all by yourself. And I think the quality I would look for the most is someone who is curious to learn, who is able to cope with that and kind of come out of it and push through the kind of challenges that come across. So curiosity and perseverance, I guess, is how I would put that.
That's great. That was my answer. Perseverance, self-driven, highly motivated, the goal of being part of a research community and contributing new knowledge. It's not a game. This is about, it's training, it's an education to be a scientist, and it is education. So while so for example, for me, it's for a PhD students okay to learn more about AR, VR, like while they're doing it, but they should demonstrate that they bring some really interested, maybe some prior expertise that could translate into that domain. We want to see some trajectory. Sometimes people, for example, have not directly worked with AR, VR technologies in my case, or maybe with some of the other technologies that my colleagues are using here. And then it's just important that we, based on what you have done so far, that we can see that it might work. And I think also it comes to application materials. Now we are already talking quite a bit about those. So we are going to enter the next block. We've just done our welcome. And so I'm referring to the document that was shared with over Twitter. And I summarized it in the beginning, and I see a lot of UI in there. So I'm not going to share a screen. We're going to do application materials. I'm wondering, one of the themes in the questions was like, what is the most important to you in an application in a package? So two ways you could answer this question. Maybe are there like, I really pay attention to the research statement, or you could also like answer a little bit more like, if you're looking for something very specific within some of these materials, maybe both would be good. We're gonna try and start with Amy. but we're probably gonna shake it up a little bit, not always go the same way. But Amy looks like Amy's always can always count on Amy, so here you go.
Okay, yeah, I'll take it. So yeah, I'd say like two major things I'm looking at are the research or the like statement of purpose and your letters of recommendation. I would say those are kind of like my initial window into what you've done. And so what I might notice in that, if you're unfamiliar with this process, is that I'm not really looking at like GPA is something I might consider, but it is not like the first filtering criteria. And similarly with like test scores, I think sometimes students think they're very important, and perhaps they are to a certain extent, but it's not something I have a lot of knowledge about and I'm paying a ton of attention to. So then in the research statement, I'm kind of looking for the ability to kind of describe the motivation behind the research you've done in the past and also that you want to do in the future. And then the research and in your statement, and as well as your letters of rec, I'm looking to see like of the things you have done in the past, like how much of those, like what parts of those did you do? So say you contributed to a big research project, it's helpful to know exactly like what parts of it you were able to perform yourself. So yeah, that's my initial answer. I'm sure people will add a lot of great stuff that I will wish I would have said.
Also, I think a very good start. I would have said the same. What Justine, do you want to add? Well, that's the same order, but anyway, Justine, do you want to add anything?
Not successfully keeping us on our toes, but that's okay.
No.
I mean, I think as a compliment to what Amy said, I think what I'm looking for across your entire application packet is evidence that you have the ability to generate feature research. So generally, I think that this evidence would come from your research statement and your letters of recommendation. But I think a specific note I want to say about your research statement, like, obviously, like one big indicator that you will continue to do good work is you talking about your projects before. I think a lot of people I've read statements for like make the mistake of just like listing a bunch of projects, like basically recapping their CV in paragraph form. And I guess like that's why I think like a lot of the points that Amy mentioned are important. Like you need to explain like what you contributed, what you took away from the project that you thought was interesting, and how that helps you chart your own trajectory forward. Because that tells me that it's not just like you've produced research in the past, like you have, like, as Michael said, like a trajectory that I can see you going in the future that I'd like to join you on.
It's nice how you said it. You would like to join them on that trajectory. I think that's a very nice way of putting it. And we're going to shake things up. Listen, I'm going to call on Parastoo this time. So
Sounds great. Yeah, I guess my answer would be research statement. I think that's the first thing. Sorry, recommendation letters. I think that's the first thing I look at. And I don't think that's super helpful at this stage because you either have done a lot of research or worked with different people who have great things to say about you, or you haven't. And there isn't much you can do. So I'm going to switch that angle. I would say if you are kind of more junior, I would recommend just working with people, even if you don't have researchers in your university, reaching out to people at other universities, taking opportunities to do research and making a good impression. But now that you're here, I'm assuming you've done at least some of that. Hopefully you have one person who's vouching for you. And at this point, I'm going to kind of shake it up. And I would say, given the field we are in, I'm visual. I like visual content. And so something easy that you could do is just put up a portfolio on a website. You're hopefully all have some CS background. And if you don't, HCI, we have lots of kind of interfaces for making websites really quickly that you could put together in a month. And that, just the link, I can look at all your projects. They don't have to be research projects. They can be class projects, just showing that you're curious, that you spent time learning about things and you're interested in things. So I would say letters and a portfolio.
DJ, what do you think?
Okay, so I think I echo most of what Amy and Justine said about motivation, research interest, and talk about like one project in depth. And let's focus on overall objective criteria like grades and more on your overall ability to do research. Also, very good point with Parastoo. I completely can relate with that about like not having the privilege to do research. in your area, in your school. I remember when I grew up, my school didn't have anyone in HCI. I looked through an online courses, I looked through taking like online HCI courses, talking to online professors, and we all take into consideration. So which is why I think that the statement is very important. Talk about the journey of like how we're able to do research, where we've come from, and where do you want to go. One other thing I want to add is I also look for some indication of why you want to do a PhD. I think it's important for me because it's like it's a long-term commitment. It's not like 3 years or 2 years. You might be in the and doing like one thing for 6 years, and you might be studying now, but the excitement might die down in like 3 years from now. So I've looked for some statements about why do you want to do a PhD? Is there some kind of a job that you're looking for that requires a PhD? Like, are you very, very interested in research, and why? And what's your goal do you like? Like, where do you want to see yourself going 6 years from now, and what kind of research you want to do? I think that is something that actually separates out some people who really, really want to do PhD, whether it's someone who just looking into different options, exploring different options. Yeah.
Right. Cool. All right. I think there were also a lot of implicit tips in terms of like maybe how to write, or at least what to emphasize in them. I will say something that is a theme throughout is some of you are concerned of not having like publications, or something was rejected. Do I even write about it? And so my answer would be, yeah, you use this research, you write about it. And I would actually go even further and make a statement here that sometimes I feel discouraged by the people that overemphasize the fact that something was published and just list these things and don't go into detail. And I'm thinking negatively about it for a few reasons. One is actually culture. Like, I don't want to have a person like that just thinks in terms of these numbers in my lab, because it creates a lot of negative feelings towards other people. And I mean, I like publishing. I'm not against papers, but I think all of us feel like the research is the important thing. So the last sentence can be whether something was published. And to be honest, if something wasn't published, I find it even more interesting to learn how you dealt with it, because it is, believe it or not, it's going to happen in your PhD. And some initial crisis management is good. I think, to be honest, I would take the person that went through a reject over the person that had three accepts. I just think that's stronger overall. None of these scenarios are probably true. Any disagreements from my friends here, or anything you want to add? I'm going to make an open call.
I mean, I just want to echo something I think DJ said, that you can talk about like as many projects as you want in your statement. There's many ways to structure a successful statement, but often a really compelling story can be told if you just focus on one project you've worked on. And it doesn't have to be something that's accepted and won awards. It has to be something that like you've engaged with and thought about. And that's often like a lot more informative than saying like, I had this paper and this paper and this paper, and like they got accepted.
I agree.
Yeah, I was just going to add kind of like a personal story to that, which is I applied to PhD programs having had no papers. And if you look at my CV, I have no papers before my PhD. I just worked on one. I was introduced to HCI 4 months before I applied. I worked on one project. I was able to be interested in it, talk about it, and communicate that. And really, I think that's maybe just an example to encourage you if you haven't had any papers published.
I'm sure that the people that met you were they could see the passion, and maybe both in the writing and then also, of course, in the interview that will follow. I think this passion, that you're serious about this, excited about something, is very, very important. So maybe I think we've touched on quite a few important things. We can also jump back, but let us proceed to interview stage. Congratulations, everybody. You made it to the interview stage. So what shall we prepare? do you have a general question first? Anybody can take it. Maybe two of you can take it. What would you do? What are your expectations when somebody comes in for a remote Zoom interview or something? Are there specific materials you would like them to prepare? Is there a strategy like focus on one, or do you like the overview bit? Who wants to take this one? And you can interpret it in other ways too. Nobody wants to take this one. What do we do now? We don't have a protocol for this.
I mean, I can
Thank you.
start. So like at UMSI, at least, we always interview people that we're interested in. And I think what I'm looking for is for you to talk about your research experiences and ideas in your own voice. And like the important distinction is, I often feel like with some interviews, like it seems like students have the expectation that they're here to like show off like all the technical things that they did, when really like I sort of gleaned that from your CV and your recommendation letters. Like I kind of want to hear like, what's your take on the project? Like, why did you personally decide to go in this direction or that direction? And I find those interviews a lot more compelling. So I just want to signal that like, this is actually what I'm looking for, more so than more CV stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So sorry.
sorry.
Let's go to Parastoo. Just like
No, just wanted to say same, and I really like to hear about why you were interested in the project and pursued it, but also what you contributed to the project, because sometimes there are multiple people working on the project. And something minor that always kind of sticks with me at the end is if you come in with interesting questions for me. So that means not just like looking at my papers and asking things, but actually having engaged with something that you want to work on in the future, or something you're curious about the school or the program that is important.
Yeah, I had a bit on questions. I'm wondering whether DJ was going to expand on that. Our moderator is interrupting everybody.
Like taking my turn in that order basically, but go on after you.
No, I was preparing the transition. So the ball is with you.
Okay, I think nothing to add on the interview side. I mean, pretty standard. I like what you all said. The type project. Why did you do it? What did you do it? What did you do? How did it different from other projects? And where did it go? The same thing. For question for me, I think one question that I asked around a lot when I was applying for PhD, and I think it really helped warrant like where I want to go. It was like, what is my potential advisor 10-year vision, and how the work that the advisor had done contribute to it. And I think it could be a very general answer that people give, but that really helped me decide like where I want to go and whether that worldview of someone that I potentially want to work with fits with what I wanted to do. And then there were questions about advising style, hands-on, hands-off, and how did the advisor and people in the group approach the project, keeping that vision into account. So that's something that worked for me a lot. Might not work for everybody else, but work a lot for me.
Great. I'm going to add one bit in. Curious how you would like to answer this one. Is it important for you that a student comes in and has a specific future research project in mind, or are you looking more into the past research, or like how important is the theme in the question is like, do I have to have a topic or a research project in mind? How do you deal with this question? Amy, what do you think?
Yeah, I wanted to add one thing to the prior answers, which I thought were all really great. I think it's worth practicing, like having a conversation about your research with other people so that you get used to talking about it if you haven't in a while. That's just one small thing to add, as I just went through a bunch of interviews and I'm sure the rest of you did too, for like faculty positions too. Anyway, I would say for the having a specific vision, I think I would actually echo, I heard this a little bit in what Justine was saying, which is like, I'm really looking for like, and I think Parastoo, I think like engagement and curiosity, and I'm definitely looking for students to have ideas. I don't expect a student, and I to have like, I want to do X for my thesis. And in fact, if like I might want a couple, like it could be nice if students suggest a couple types of things that they're interested in and come up with ideas about. But if a student really like, and on the other hand, if a student says like, I want to do this specific project and this is the only project I want to do, then that also might be like, I might realize that that student might not be a good fit for me, but they might be for someone else who does specifically want to do that project. So, so yeah, that's my thought, is like, I'm really looking for engagement, definitely having ideas about things to do, but not necessarily, you know, a very rigid view of a specific project. Yeah.
Right, and I think I answered it similarly as well. There were some questions in that direction. I have witnessed a few times where a really strong applicant just like fell between faculty. Like nobody felt like none of us were really working on this. And the way the statement was written was like, I really want to do this. I need to study with this specific population that nobody has previously studied with, and we didn't know how to access it. And so, yeah, I in my answers to many of your questions, I always speak or say that you should think of these as examples you give. It should read like examples you could be very excited about, but you don't have to do them. You could still be excited about something else, and try to fit these examples somehow. Maybe I don't tailor, like I wouldn't tailor specifically to faculty. Like not every application, unless it's like your favorite professor, you write this really personal one, but normally it is, I have some advice on how to potentially structure statements and which portion is the one that you personalize, which is really only where you list the faculty. Most of the statement stays the same. So yeah, that was, we talked a lot about the materials. We just talked in the document, we talked about interviews just a little bit. There were some examples of questions you might want to ask, like the hands-on, hands-off advisor. Although I never know which one is actually good. I don't know. And I do have quite a few ideas on how to make decisions later when you have offers, but that's going to be a difficult time. I think the general advice there is just you are making the decision, but you should probably talk to people you trust to get some from a research advisor or something to get their take on it as well. But it is your decision, and it can be quite difficult sometimes. So let's say before we hand over to a more open Q&A. So we've covered research interests, what you're looking for, materials. I am actually with Parastoo, to be honest. The first thing I look is recommenders. It helps me filter. Do I know, how much time do I have to invest in order to understand? And really, it is important who writes these recommendation letters. It's actually more important to me that I know them, not that they're like superstars. Most of my friends are, I mean, they are like stars here, but they're not like these, they're not Don Norman or something. I'm not looking for Don Norman. In fact, I wouldn't know how to deal with his recommendation. And it's probably also unlikely that he would write one, but anyway, I think it's more like also last thing maybe to keep in mind with interviews. I wonder actually about that. So we all know each other. And I sometimes ask my candidates where else they are like potentially interviewing. And I've actually oftentimes just like said, okay, then go to University of Washington. If you can work with Jake Bobrock or James Fogarty, I love them both. You just go. Is that something that our students should be prepared to? And would you advise to be open about that, or would you advise to be more discreet? Or what's your take on when you have competing things? Is it like, I never know what kind of advice you would give, so I'm curious. One of you?
A specific situation where I've asked this question is when I'm not sure whether somebody is like wanting to go to a computer science program, but for whatever reason decided to apply to information science or wants to be in an information science program. But like, I think one implication is like, at least from my perspective, like saying approximately where you're applying or saying like precisely where you're applying both work for me. But I'd love to hear what others say.
Yeah, I haven't had the experience of being on the other side, but I remember, I guess, 6 years ago when I was applying to PhD programs, I actually benefited a lot from, they weren't interviews at the time. I think the style has changed slightly. It was more like visits. And I really benefited from talking to different schools about what they thought and what the fit was. So I was pretty open and I benefited from those conversations. So maybe it's just a personal preference.
Yeah, that's right. There's like two types of interviews. I'd say just clarification in terms of process. We have submitted our applications. The professor is interested and they talk to us. First time is an interview. Then there is the, oh, professor really loves you and they make you an offer. And then you come and visit. So most schools will fly you in and there will be really nice visits and everything is beautiful when you go there. Like, wow, everybody treats the students so well here, everybody gets nice food. So it's like they're showing their best side. And then is the other interview. At that point, it actually has turned around a little bit. It's more like you're interviewing the faculty member. Are you the right person for me? And so I wonder whether that was, I think at that last stage is when you should, I would recommend playing open cards because it also helps. Like we are also humans, we also need to plan. Like if you're unlikely to come and work with me, just tell me, then I can also think about other students. And if I'm waste an offer, because you're not going to take it, it really puts me in a difficult position. On the other hand, you should still act in your own interest, I would say. But I like it more when we're like open and transparent, which I would. Coming back to, it's not a game. It's like, it's actually quite very important. It also is trust building. And also finally, a lot of the students that didn't end up working with me, I still see them at conferences. We still interact and it's not like they feel like, oh, I should have come to you, but it's more, they're actually doing very well. And I knew that. And so I'm very happy for them. And there were no hard feelings ever. So yeah, so that was the final maybe bit on the interviews. So now we will open, and we'll do this maybe in 2 rounds. We will have a Q&A now that is still being recorded. It could be useful for some of our students. So if you feel like you're not so comfortable with it, then you have other ways of asking the questions through the document. But I'm curious, does anybody have a question they would like to ask into the panel? This is the hard part, this transition. We didn't practice this before. Yes, Zachary.
Hello. Thank you for recording, by the way. I was the one that emailed you. I fortunately was able to attend on time. So my question is, I'm not planning on applying this cycle, but the one following. Do you have any recommendations for anything I should do?
Research.
That is one thing I am doing right now.
It's good. You're here. Another check. You seem serious. Okay, what else do we have?
I think just to follow up on that point, something I would recommend is maybe exploring your interest at this time as well. So if you're working with one researcher, now you have the time to maybe spend the summer doing a different type of research, or spending next year kind of working with someone else. So that goes back to kind of recommendation letters, but also for you to actually have more of an idea of which faculty might be a good alignment for the type of work you want to do.
I wanted to just add something really quick to that. I think there might be other people in the same situation too. I would say one pitfall with working with a bunch of different faculty can be that you don't get kind of through a whole project ever. And so I would say, like, if you already have that depth of experience of working through an entire project cycle, then that's an excellent time to explore. But if you do it before that, like, it's really what I guess what I'm looking for is often like one really excellent letter of recommendation and everything else is bonus. So that's one thing I might think about. And I've seen that pitfall before. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point.
All right, thank you for the question. Let's see whether we have, can be a totally different question. We don't have to stick to any particular themes now. And curious what you would like to ask.
Hello.
Oh, sorry, I see the hands now. You just appeared on my screen. So Anderson.
Yeah. So I have a question regarding like so for the so like for you as all like for the supervisors are you replying to, are you like replying emails to all prospective PhD students, or you select some of them that you are interested in?
Yeah, so be honest.
I'll just quickly share my process because it changed a lot. The first year I replied to everyone in a lot of detail. But this year I don't have as much time and I get a lot of these requests. So, and to be fair, I don't respond for a while and then I respond to all of them with like form emails essentially, but that's just because the volume is quite high. And then I expect to wait to read the full application process and then interview students when there is a good fit. So yeah, that I was just sharing my specific strategy, but I know every professor is really different with this.
This is really validating to hear because my trajectory for how much time I spent on these emails has definitely like went down. But I would say like for me, like one of the problems that sending the email solve is like signaling to the faculty that they should read your application. And like, I feel like at least at UMSI, I don't know how other application systems work. Like there are places where you can write down which professor you want to work with. And if you write down our names and like, we will hopefully see your application. I think that's like a much better way to go about it. Because like, I think I learn a lot more from people's like application package than from like the emails they send. I guess like one thing I will say though, is that writing the emails could be a way of like practicing writing about your research interests. So in that case, like do it for yourself. But yeah, like we're honestly busy. So yeah.
Yeah, and there's
And
nothing.
also, yeah, and also a follow-up question. Yeah.
Okay, Anderson, we'll go put you back in line. I will add one thing to that. I would also not negatively interpret if you don't get a response. So it doesn't necessarily mean there's not a good fit. It doesn't mean that the professor doesn't like you. And then it becomes the hard part. Like, do you now keep resending that email? Then it can become annoying at some point. So I would also recommend writing like after you have applied. We are more likely to put in like everything is a bit clearer, right? Like this email, I got a lot of these emails right now, whether I'm looking for PhD students and I'm not sure what to say. Yes, but then there's not much more to say in that email. And so I would write to those that you're very serious about. And so maybe write to 3 professors that you really care about is my advice. Don't spam everybody. Also, don't spam everybody in the same department. We talk to each other. I've had multiple times where, oh, I'm also interviewing. Anyway, we have adjusted that a little bit now with how we coordinate among the faculty. So this is all on email. Anderson, please don't be angry. We may get back to you. Jiatong had also raised their hand. So Jiatong.
Hey guys, thank you so much for organizing this PhD office hour, first of all. So I'm a senior undergraduate student from UChicago and I'm applying this upcoming cycle. So my question is, I know some school use like a committee-based, selection method, and other type of school is more like advisor dominated. So I assume there will be some like slight difference in terms of, what strategy you will take. Because like sometimes the faculty who read your application may not necessarily be in the HCI, or they can do like maybe machine learning or other relevant field. So I'm just not sure, like, are there anything like students can do to maybe clarify their research interest or, fit to, the school based on this two different type of, admission, like selection method. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually curious. It was something I wanted to ask into the panel. So for us at UMich, we just pick the students. Is there anybody who, I think CMU is like you make recommendations and the committee picks. Is this the case for where you're working as well? Amy and Parastoo and actually the others are UMich, I think.
Yeah, so I've been involved with admissions at UC Berkeley and at UT Austin now. I was at CMU, but I was not involved with admissions. I get the sense that the public universities or at least these two public universities, there's some aspect of a committee, like multiple people will read your application, but if you say the name of the faculty that you're interested in working with and say the area, at least for UT, because I am the only person in HCI at CS and CS, then I will read the application. So I guess hopefully that's helpful. It will be read by multiple people, but I would be, I would see all the people who mentioned my name. Yeah.
It's unlikely that when Amy or anybody here wants to work with a student that the committee is going to say no, 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 unless there is a technical KO. So ultimately, no matter which way they do it, you need to reach the faculty member and you need to get them interested. The committee is not the bar usually. Okay, so thanks for that question. We're gonna, there was somebody else. I don't have an order, but Ruotong, you were raising your hand.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Michael. And hi, Gigi. So I have a question regarding something in personal statement. I think you didn't mention it before and emphasize more on research experience. So I'm wondering how much do you expect or you don't expect at all, in the personal statement or in the statement of purpose? I mentioned some of my cultural background that motivated me to explore something in this field. And of course, I mean, I think people have different cultural background. Another concern I have is whether I can persuade others, persuade professors. I'm interested in this because of my cultural background and also my research experience.
Thank you for the question. DJ, do you want to take it?
Yeah. Okay. So I think not all schools look for personal statement. That's one. Some school, very specific school that have personal statement along with the statement of purpose. Some schools also make it optional. I mean, you can submit one if you like the committee to consider, or you don't have to. But I think this is one of the places where I would look for student personal background. For example, there's a lot of things been thrown here, like GPA and a personal statement, recommendation letter, something that but I remember my background. So I did my undergrad in India, and there was just no one there who was actually well connected in the HCI community. And I think at that point, if I hadn't gotten to submit a personal statement, then I would have listed my personal background, where I come from and what my culture thing is, and why, for example, I don't have HCI people to write my recommendation letter, as an example, right? So I think that's really where you can bring up some unique story about your personal background and for the community to consider. And like I said before, it's a holistic thing. We're not looking for high grade or a very strong personal statement. All the personal statement, research statement. Although research statement help a lot, but the holistic view of what we think of you as a student in our lab, basically. So that's where you could bring some special consideration there.
Right. One thing I would emphasize is I sometimes read these stories when people get admitted to all the Ivy Leagues. That is at a lower level. At the PhD level, it's not essays, you're right. It's not about being dramatic necessarily. They are statements. So a personal motivation to do research, a cultural background, a disability you have, that you really you really want to invest your time in. They can sometimes be good motivators, but we don't have to invent these things. So don't invent things unless for the sake of writing a good statement, just be true. I would recommend being true to this. So the statements that start with, my father once told me, and then I wanted to be a scientist. They don't work so well on me. There's not a strong motivation. And also last thing, maybe be clear between what goes into personal statement and what goes into the research statement. So they can be connected, but they are different statements, unless they are not, as DJ said, in some institutions. Then, but the emphasis should always be on the research. So don't make it too personal.
But I guess I would add that, like, if you have like some sort of personal background that informs your research, like the way that you do research, and you're able to articulate that in a compelling way, then that's often something that will stand out for me as well.
Right, cool. So let's thank Rutong and Sicheng. Going to take you next. I see the other hands too, so we'll get to you.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes, I have a something that somehow I like to think about the words. So if one got no offer, but he really would like to enroll himself in research after his graduation. So what would be the next step?
So, okay, so the scenario was we applied quite a bit, and then in the end, it didn't happen with a PhD position. What is the recommendation? I had one of these students, and there was just a very difficult time with the pandemic and unfinished research projects, and then not necessarily understanding maybe on the advising side. So the student persisted, actually started a job in industry, but deepened some skill, maybe not necessarily research, but overall gained experience, reapplied, and got into a PhD program. So perseverance. Anyway, Amy or Parastoo, did you want to add anything to this cartoon?
Yeah, maybe I'll do a plug that Princeton has a funded master's program, and just basically master programs that you can apply for fellowships might be a good start to be in the university setting and being able to do some more research and learn more about what you're interested in.
Right, good point. And last thing, maybe on the mental health note, so being rejected is never cool, but you don't know why you were not accepted. So a very simple case that has nothing to do with you is that the professor is poor. They don't have money. So it's maybe one of the most common cases actually. And then you can be the best person ever, but if they can borrow money, it's not gonna happen. And then why get somebody else's hopes up? Like why send somebody through the interview process to then reject them in the end? That's why they will probably not get back to you. So anyway, that's one example. There might be others, but just don't think that you're not good enough if it doesn't work out. It could be just that time. There are so many different parameters. Very important to keep in mind. So if you want to be a PhD student, you just try again next time, and do something meaningful to you in the meantime. For example, entering a master's program, coming to the US, if it's possible. So we are going to go to Zhang. Zhang 1.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Hello.
Great. Hi, I'm a grad student at University of Pittsburgh applying for this cycle. And I have 2 questions. I'm very interested in narrative games, online community, as well as privacy, but like you can see there are 3 are very different topics. And my current research experience only lies in narrative game. So how should I demonstrate my interest and my potential to professors whose research interests are in online communities and privacy when I'm reaching out to them? And the second question is, in the personal statements or the research statements, how should I explain and also like articulate myself about my research interests so that it doesn't seem like I don't know what I want to do? And then also avoid a situation that professor think I only want to study or focus on one specific topic.
Okay, good, very good related questions. Who wants to take it? So just saying to Anderson, we count this as one question, Anderson.
Yeah, I'll try. I think what I'm hearing a little bit is that you've done research primarily in one area, but maybe a mix of that research. Like I could see a world in which that research kind of informed these possible like problems or interest areas that you have, and that could be an interesting thing to share in your statement, just in terms of like like X, Y, I noticed from doing like this research that these like problems remain, and I would be interested in and then I wouldn't worry too much about like usually the case where someone has, and then the other question you had was about like specific and like getting locked in, like sounding like you're locked into a project versus people believing you have some ideas. I think it's not it's sort of, I'll say that the statements that have gone it's kind of rare that statements hit the like I'm so locked into a project type of vibe, but usually they will be very explicit through. So the statements I've experienced in that case have been extremely explicit, like almost across the whole statement, that I only I want to work on this project about like specifically XYZ, but the recommendation Michael gave to frame it as examples of things you'd be interested in working in, I think is a really nice one, and would be kind of safe to avoid that. Yeah.
Like when I'm relating my research, like reading those research interests with my research experience, it's better to have some like publications that say maybe when I'm doing this research, I find out blah, 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 blah. And then also from these publications, I feel like they may have some connections in privacies or other fields, or so that's why I'm interested in also pursuing this kind of study.
Maybe a strategic note is at maximum, in most places you will have 2 advisors. We have had things in SI where 3 advisors work together. It is very unusual. So an advisor will feel comfortable if they can advise you on your research. If it's 3 areas that are very you only see how to combine them, it's tricky. Maybe you can start picking the one that you're most excited about and then emphasize that, and then say in the future I could imagine, and doing the example strategy that we mentioned earlier, rather than saying I need 3 advisors, one gaming, one. Okay, then you're like putting yourself in a. No, I'm actually quite serious in terms of how to formulate and how to approach the strategy. You can, an advisor. That's maybe the other thing is sometimes people have the expectation to describe a research project, and that's what they do in their PhD thesis. It's not like that. It's never going to be like that. Also, it's very likely that you evolve into other things, and you are allowed to explore as long as it makes sense for the advisor. And then there could be I had a PhD student that transitioned to another advisor. The other advisor was better in information visualization. I didn't know anything, and it just felt like a natural transition. So these evolutions are possible. I would start small. I'm a big fan of iterative design. So start from the core and emphasize this. Don't put yourself into this like corner where I need James Landay and I need Don Norman. Oh, they are different places. Okay. So that was supposed to be a fun example, but read between the lines. So we have actually Muhammad had the hand up for a long time. So let's.
Yeah. So am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So I had like 2 connected questions. So if a candidate is to apply, let's say there's 2 candidates applying, one has like a more spread out skill set and the other has like a very specific focused mastery on a particular topic, or like a subject area. So which one are you more likely to give a chance to? The one which has like a more spread out?
Answered in the document. It's a question I've answered in the document, so I would ask you to refer to the document. I think it's very hypothetical. In the end, it depends on you and not necessarily the way you construct the scenario. So refer to the document. Sorry to interrupt you there. I just also noticed the time. Very impolite, Michael. Germans, So what we're going to do instead, and I think there's this theme of asking 2 questions at a time now, and also this hypothetical strategic. So let's just say, if you have questions like this, first, I mean, the questions are repeating already in the document, so I may sometimes just refer back. If you have questions to specific faculty, you could also mention that, and then I know I'm not asking all of you to monitor this document all the time, but I will engage you if there is a specific question for you. Otherwise, I'll try my best to answer. So keep inserting your questions there. In the interest of time, I will just refer you to the document. I would like to do, if my friends still have a bit of time, any like final words, would like to go around. We're going to do it the other way around. We're going to start from DJ, and then we're going to go to the remaining colleagues. So DJ, is there any last like final advice you want to give to our students?
So I think we've talked a lot in that whole thing. So I think one final piece of advice to sum it all is like there is a lot of discussion going on around like how would you put your application to advisor research interest and stuff. But I want to like quickly emphasize that it's important to be who you are, and don't try to overput your work or personal statement or research statement to support some goal that might be there. But be honest about what you've done. Be who you are, talk about your work, what you want to do, and where do you see yourself in several years. And then, find people who fit your motivation and interest rather than that way down.
Okay, so honesty, truth, cool. Parastoo, what do you think?
I just wanted to add that having gone to like conferences like Grace Hopper or Tapia conferences, something I've seen a lot is people thinking they're not good enough. And that's definitely how I felt. I didn't want to apply to the PhD program I ended up at, and I was basically forced by my advisor to apply. And I just want to say, if there's someone you really want to work with, just apply, try to communicate why you think that would be a good fit. And obviously money is an issue because these programs cost to apply. Always look for ways that you can waive the fee. For example, at Princeton, there are all these ways you can, as long as you're part of a group of community, you can get this fee waiver. So definitely look for those as well and take advantage of that.
Good points. You can always apply everywhere. There's no like MIT is too good for you. It doesn't exist. Just apply. Okay, so we sorted that out, and then good tip on the money. Justine, what do you want to share with us?
I think just 2 points to build off of the previous one. Some schools have programs where you can submit your application to a current PhD student and they'll give feedback on it, especially if you're from a marginalized group. I know that Cornell and maybe Stanford have these things. That's a really great resource, I think. The other is I'd echo DJ's point to be yourself. Like you can do a lot of strategizing, but ultimately you'd be trying to read the minds and the institutional processes of like every single university you're applying to. So like focus on like articulating like what perspective you bring to the research and like what you want to do. That's harder than it sounds. And I spent like 10 drafts of like bad statement of purposes before I got a good one. So yeah, just, don't give up.
Yeah, cool. Totally agree with what you said. Amy, our final word is with Amy today.
Yes, I love that Justine brought up the writing 10 statements of purpose before it was a good one. So yeah, get early drafts, get feedback often. Like this is all stuff that you want to make sure you're leaving time for. And then my other piece of advice is like, I think I remember being at this stage and I actually was applying with no publications and like I did have research, but it got rejected like 3 times. And so I think each one of those times it felt like a really big deal at the time. So whether it was a grad school rejection or a paper rejection, I want to emphasize that the road is very long and there are lots of there's always opportunities and other paths to take. And so I think that like, I hope that everyone can, stay positive and use this as like a nice reflective time, even though I know it feels stressful now. Yeah.
Yeah, it is stressful. Mental health is a very, very big deal. Crisis management during a PhD, it is a hard program. no matter where you go. The scientists are brutal to each other oftentimes, and no matter how experienced or old you are, it still hurts when somebody rejects your work. So yeah, I think there were a lot of good pieces of advice here. I wanted to thank everybody, and again, apologize to some of you that I had to cut short. Make use of the document. No problem repeating a question. I have a mental model of what's in there, so just ask it. I would encourage you to go through some of the questions, so I think there's a lot of good questions in there already. Thanks everybody for joining us today, both students and faculty, and then good luck everybody with the applications. All right.
Thanks so
Bye-bye.
much for organizing, Michael.
Yes,
Yep.
thank you, Michael. This is awesome.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a good breath, Michael. Bye, everybody.